In this tutorial, I will show you how to create these procedural pixel shaders in Blender. So I'm going to start by showing you how I created this basic pixel shader, and then here is the node setup, and after we create the node setup, I'll show you how to join it together into this custom node group. So we have the scale of the pixels, then we also have color 1 and also color 2, and then we also have this color factor, and this is actually controlling the color ramp in the material. So I'm actually going to show you how to set up a basic driver, and the driver is actually going to edit the position value of this black tab here on the color ramp. And as well as that, I'll also show you how to set up the materials so that whenever you duplicate the material, it's going to randomly generate different pixels. So you can see as I'm duplicating this, the pixels have random positions. And then after that material, I'll also show you how to create some Minecraft style shaders. So I'll show you how to create a sand block, a dirt block, and also a stone block. And then I'll also show you how to give these materials some normals to make them look bumpy and make them look like they're some sort of advanced texture pack with a bump map. And the project files of this tutorial are completely free on my Gumroad store and Patreon page, so links are in the description if you'd like to download these materials. And if you're downloading on Gumroad, you can just type 0 into the price box and then download for free. But if you'd like to send me a little tip and help support this channel, you can punch in a few dollars into the price box before purchasing, and that's a great way to send me a little tip and help support this channel. So real quick, I'll show you what I have set up in the 3D viewport if you want to set it up the same way that I have. So I pressed Shift A, I went here to Mesh and I added a cube, and then the default primitive shapes in Blender are a little bit higher than an average human when modeling to the real life scale in Blender. So what I'm just going to do is scale this by 0.5 and then hit enter so it's only half the size, and then I can press Ctrl A and I can apply the scale, so that's now the object's new default size. Now for the lighting, if you go here to the world properties, I added in the abandoned tank farm 04, and this is a free HDRI from polyhaven.com. Links in the description if you'd like to download it. And I downloaded the 1K HDR version. So when you download the HDRI, you can add a new world, and then next to color, you can click on the yellow dot and you can choose environment texture, and then you can just click the open button and open up the downloaded HDRI. And then if you want to make the background transparent so you can't see the HDRI in the background, you can go here to the render properties and you can open up the film tab, and then you can just check mark the transparent button just to hide the world from the viewport. And then also to make the colors look a bit nicer, if you open up the color management, I'm using the view transform of Filmic and the look at very high contrast, just to pop out the colors and make everything look more contrasty and saturated. So I'm in the shading workspace, so I have the 3D viewport right over here, and I'm in the rendered mode, and then I have the shader editor right over here, and I'm just going to select this object. Let's click on new to add a new material. And then I will also be using the Node Wrangler add-on to preview the different nodes. So if you don't have the Node Wrangler enabled, just click on edit and then go to the preferences, and then over there in the add-ons tab, just search for Node Wrangler and you can check mark the Node Wrangler add-on, and I'll show you how to use it in the video. So I'm going to press Shift A, I'm going to go to the search, and I'm going to search for the Voronoi texture, and let's drop it down here. And then I can Control Shift and select the Voronoi texture. That's using the feature of the Node Wrangler. So if you Control Shift and select different nodes, that'll preview the node on the object. Now I want to Control Shift and select the Voronoi texture twice because I want to preview the color values. And as you can see, it's giving us this colorful cracked texture. Now I can take this randomness value and I can turn this to 0. And already we have something close to a pixel texture. Now the colors are all random, but we already have all of these little squares with different colors. Now with the Voronoi texture selected, I'm also going to press Ctrl T. That'll add the texture coordinate and mapping, and I want to use the object coordinates, so I'll put the object into the vector. And the object coordinates will place the texture on the object more evenly. And then we can also use the scale values of the mapping to scale the entire material. Now I want to have more pixels, so I'm just going to scale this up by turning up the scale value on the Voronoi. And specifically, I'm going to use a scale value of 37 because I found that 37 looks good. If I zoom way in here to the corner, you can see that 37 makes it so that the pixels all have an even size. Because if it's a little bit offset, like something like that, then some of the pixels on the edges of the cube will be smaller or bigger. But of course, that will depend on what object you're adding this onto. So this pixel shader does look cool, and if you like the rainbow colors, you could leave it how it is, but I want to be able to control the colors better. So I'll press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I can search for a color ramp, and let's drop the color ramp here, after the Voronoi texture. So now it is just black and white. So you can now drag these values around, and that's going to make it more contrasty. Now what you could also do is you could just change the colors here. So if you just want to make it some different colors, you could maybe make this blue. You could also hold down the control key and click right here in the color to make a new tab, and you could just make it whatever colors that you want. But what I'm going to do is select the color ramp and then hit the backspace because I want to reset the color ramp. So what I want to do instead is click on the linear here, and I want to change it to constant because I don't want any blending within the colors. So I'm not going to use linear. You can see linear has some different gray values because it's blending black and white. So I'm just going to change it to constant. And now if I drag this out, you can see it's only going to be white or black. And so now we have this really cool pixel shader. And again, if you wanted to, you could do the same thing by holding down the control key, adding some tabs, and you could make some different colors and you could kind of drag this around. I'm not going to do that though, but you could totally customize this how you want. Now I actually want to flip the color ramp values, so I'm going to drag the black over here and then drag the white over here. So now I can drag this black tab around and it can either be fully white or it can turn more and more black. Now when we join this together into a custom node group, I want to be able to control these color ramp colors. So I'll press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for a mix node. Let's drop this up here, and then I want to click on the float and I want to change this to color instead. And then I can drop the mix node after the color ramp. Now we actually want the color ramp color to be going into the factor. And so the factor is controlling where it's going to be color A and where it's going to be color B. So now I can make the two colors. So on color A, I'm just going to make this black, and then on color B, I can just make this fully white. But of course, you could change this to whatever colors you want. And then I'm going to drag the principled shader right here, and I'm going to take the result from the mix, and I can just put that into the base color, and then I can control shift and select the base color to preview it. And then you could also play around with the roughness if you want it to be more rough or more shiny, or you could also turn the specular down if for some reason you didn't want any reflection. You can see if I turn the specular all the way to 0, there still are some shadows, but there isn't any reflection. I'm going to leave the specular at a 0.5. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I want to be able to duplicate these objects and have the pixels be randomized every time I duplicate the object. But you can see right now it's not actually doing that. So I'll press Ctrl Z to undo that. So what I want to do on this Voronoi is I want to take the 3D and I want to turn it to 4D instead. Then I can change the W value, and the W value is just going to randomize the pixels. Now, if I duplicate this, you can see it's still not randomizing the pixels. You can see it's the same. So I'm going to press Ctrl Z. So what I can do is press Shift A, I can go to the search, and I can search for the object info node. And I'm going to drop the object info right down here. Now, if I Control Shift and select the object info, I'm going to continue to Control Shift and select it, and I'm going to continue to keep on clicking on it until we get down here to the random value. So this random value is going to randomly generate colors from white to black every time you duplicate the object which has that material. So because this cube object has the same material, every time I duplicate this, you can see that the cubes are going to randomly be different colors. So I'll just press Ctrl Z to undo that. So what we can do now is we can take the random and we can put the random into the W value. So you can kind of think of the white and black values as being values from 0 to 1. And so the random values are randomly going to generate values from 0 to 1 in the W value. So let's plug the random from the object info into the W value, and then I can Control Shift and select the principled shader. So I can now duplicate this, and you can see every time it's going to randomly generate different pixels in different locations. And this is the base of the material. But now let's join this together into a custom node group. So I'm going to click and drag to box select all these nodes except the material output, and then I can press Ctrl G, and that'll join it together into a node group. And if you press the tab key with the node group selected, that'll go in and out of the node group. So I'm going to drag this over here, and I can also drag it out to make it a bit bigger, and let's rename this to Pixel. So now I can press the tab key to go into the node group, and if I press the N key to open up the side panel, I can click here on group, and there are inputs and outputs. Now right here on the output, I'm going to double click on this to rename it, and I just want to rename it to shader because personally I like that better. So let's now add all the custom values into the group input. So the first value that I want to add is the scale to change the size of the entire material. So let's take the scale from the mapping and I can put that into the group input. And then if you click right up here on scale, right now, if I tab to go out of the node group, you can see there are 3 different values, but I just want one value to control the scale of the entire material. So I will tab to go into the node group, and right here on the type, I want to click on vector and I want to change it to float instead. Then I just need to tab out of the node group, and on the scale here, I can change it back to the default of 1. And then I can just drag this around and that'll change the size of the pixels. So let's go back into the node group. Now I also want to add the colors, so let's take the mix right here. We'll take A and put that here into the group input, and then also B, we'll put that into the group input as well. And then right here, we can click on this to rename this. So I can just rename this to color 1, and then this one right here, I can rename this to color 2. So I'm now going to show you how to add a simple driver, and the driver is going to control this position value. And this driver is actually pretty simple to set up. So what I'm going to do right here on the inputs is I'm going to click on the plus here, and that's going to add a new input. You can see the new input is right down there, but it doesn't have anything plugged up to it. Now I want to double click on this to rename it, and I want to rename it to color factor, but you can rename it to whatever makes sense for you. And then right here on the type, I don't want this to be a color value. I want this to be a number value instead. So I'm going to change it to float. Now we actually don't want to plug anything into this color factor. So I'm going to tab to go out of the node group. Now we need to copy the data of this color factor. So what I'm going to do is right click on this color factor value, and then I want to click on copy data path. And real quick, just to show you what this is doing, I opened up a text file on my computer, and I'm just going to press Control V, and that's going to paste the value that we copied. So this text here is the data that Blender needs to know which value that we're using. So when I right clicked here and then clicked on copy data path, that copied that bit of text. So I'm now going to hit the tab key to go into the node group, and I now want to add a driver to this position value because that is controlling where the black tab is. So I'm going to right click on this, and then I can click on add driver. And you can see it's going to have some driver settings, and it might look pretty complex, but we're actually only going to be changing a few of the settings. Now, if for some reason you move your mouse away and the driver settings go away, that's totally fine. You can just right click on the position value, and then you can click on edit driver, and the driver settings are back up here. And you can also see the position value has turned purple, or kind of a pink color, and that is telling us that there is a driver applied to it. So again, I'm going to right click on this position value, and I will click on edit driver. Now we want to change the type of the driver. So if you click here on type, I want to change this to sum values, because sum values is just going to give us a number value. So now we need to give it the data that we want the one value outside of the node group to control this value. So what I actually want to do is get rid of this variable here, and I want to add a new variable. So right here, I want to click on this X button, and that'll get rid of the variable. And then I want to click here to add an input variable. So we've added a new one. Now that we've added a new one, you can see that there is this button right here. And if I click on this button, it's going to give us these different ID types. Now I am using a material because this is a procedural material that we're creating. So if I click here on the type, I want to change this to material. And then right here, you can see this is red. And so basically we need to tell it what material we're using. So if I click right here, you can see here is the pixel material. And if you have a bunch of materials, you can just look right up there to see what the name is. And then you can just select the material that you're using. So you just want to select this current material. Now we have a path, and this path is where we're going to put the other data which we copied. So if you click here on the path, you can then just press Control V, and that is going to paste the text which I showed you earlier. And then just to make sure it's working, you can click on the Update Dependencies button, and then move your mouse away so that goes away. So now I can hit the tab key to go out of the node group, and we have told this value here that it's going to control this position value. So if I turn this factor value up, you can see now it is changing the factor of those colors. And then the last value that I want to add is a roughness value. So I'll hit the tab key to go back into the node group, and I will just take the roughness here from the principled shader, and I will put that here into the bottom one. And then I can tab to go out of the node group. So there we go, we have the basic pixel shader. So we have the overall scale, and then we also have the different colors, then we also have the color factor, and then we also have the roughness of the material. So that is the first shader, so I'm now going to show you how to create those Minecraft style shaders. So what I'll do first is just select this cube object, and I'll press Shift D to duplicate it. I'll just bring it over here, and then I can also just like bring it up here because I want some more space to make more of them. Now I'm going to click on this object here, and I'll click on the X button just to delete this material, and let's click on New to add a new material. And I can just rename this Sand. So I'm going to use the same base setup to create the pixel texture that I used in the first material. So I'll press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I can search for the Voronoi texture. Let's drop this here. And then with the Voronoi texture selected, I'm also going to press Control T. That's going to add the texture coordinate and mapping. And I want to use the object coordinates, so I'll put the object into the vector. And then I can Control Shift and select the Voronoi texture. And I want to Control Shift and select it twice so that we can preview the color value. And then just like we did before, I want to take the random value and I want to turn that to 0. And this way it's going to give us these colorful pixels. And then I can also play around with the scale. Now on the scale value, I'm going to use a scale value of 17 because I like the size of that to kind of make it look like a Minecraft block. And also I want to make sure it is a value which puts the edges of the pixels on the edge here of these blocks. Because if I turn this up a little bit, you can see there are some more pixels there on the edge, but they're like too small. So I'm going to use a value of 17. Now I want to be able to control the colors, so I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go to the search, and I can search for a color ramp, and let's put that after the Voronoi texture. And then I can drag these back so I have more space, and I can actually just take the color and I can put that into the base color of the principled shader, and I can Control Shift and select the principled shader to preview it. So we can now make the colors to make it look like a sand block. So on the black tab here, I'm going to click on this color, and I'm going to make this a bit brighter, and then I'm going to make it kind of a yellowish tannish color. And if you want to use the same color that I'm using, you can go to the hex value and you can punch in a hex value of C0, 9E, 6C. Then I'm going to hold down the control key and I'm going to click right about here to add another tab. And then this one, if I click on this, I want to make this kind of a pale yellow color. And the hex value that I'll be using for this color is going to be EA, D793. And then this last color here, this one is going to be a very slight yellowy color and slightly green. And if you want to use the same color that I'm using, the hex value for this is FFDD. And now it kind of looks like a Minecraft sand block. Now I also want to be able to duplicate this object, and I want to have the pixels be randomized each time I duplicate it. So what I'm going to do on the Voronoi texture is I'm going to click on the 3D and I'm going to change this to 4D. And this way we have the W value, and the W value will randomly generate different pixels. Now when I duplicate this, I want the W value to randomly be changed from 0 to 1. And that way the pixels will be randomized. So I'm going to press Shift A, I'm going to go to the search, and I'm going to add an object info node and just drop this down here. And we're going to set this up the same way that we did with the other material. So we have this random value on the object info, and if you Control Shift and click a bunch of times on the object info, that'll go all the way down to the random. And if I duplicate the object, the random value is randomly going to generate colors from white to black every time I duplicate the object. So I can take the random value and I can put that into the W value of the Voronoi. And so the white and black values of the random are basically telling it different random values from 1 to 0. So this way, if I Control Shift and select the principled shader, I can now duplicate this object and you can see it's going to randomize the pixels every time. So now what I'm going to do to save some time is I'm going to use the same material to create the dirt block and the stone block. So with this object selected, I'll press Shift D to duplicate, and I'm just going to bring this down on the Z axis. And then I'm just going to click on this button right here. It looks like two little pieces of paper, and that's going to duplicate the material, but it'll keep the same data. And then I can click on this to rename it, and I'm going to rename it to dirt. So the only thing that we need to change now is the color ramp values. So what I'm going to do is drag this tab over a little bit, and then I'm going to make this a orangey color, and then I will make it darker so that it is brown. And the hex value that I'll be using for this material is 4B3525 if you want to use the same color I'm using. Now I'm also going to drag this color very close because I want to make it look like there are little stones in the dirt. So I'm going to click on this color and I'm going to click here on the RGB and I'm going to turn these all to 1, and that way there won't be any color, and then I can just make it a darker color. And the exact color that I'm going to be using over here on the hex value is going to be 717171. And then I'm going to hold down the control key and click to add another tab here, and I can drag this tab over, and then this is also going to be a brown color, so we're going to make it in the orange and then make it a bit darker. And the hex value that I'll be using for this color is 674B35. And then finally, I just want to add one more lighter brown right here. So I'm going to click on this color over here and I'm going to leave it where it is over here. And I'm going to click on this color and I'm going to make it just a bit darker and a bit more brown. And the hex value for this color will be 9B704F. And there we go, we now have a nice dirt block. So let's do the same thing and create a stone block. So I'll select this block, I'll press Shift D to duplicate it, drop it down here, and then I can click on this file icon right here to duplicate the material, and I can rename it to stone. And then if I select the color ramp, I will hit the backspace button, and that is going to reset the color ramp. And then I'm going to hold down the control key and I'm going to click right here to add a tab. And then this one I'm going to make kind of a mid-gray color. And the hex value for this one is 686868. And then this one right here, I actually want this to be a lighter color, so I'm going to make it a lighter gray. And this color is going to be 7E, 7E, 7E. And then this white one over here, I'm just going to make this kind of a light gray. And this color is going to be a hex value of 8E, 8E, 8E. And there we go, we now have a nice looking stone block. So now I'm going to show you how to edit these materials to make it look like one of those Minecraft texture packs, which look a bit more realistic and have a bit of a bump map, but they still have the original vanilla look of Minecraft with the pixels. So what I'm going to do is click and drag to box select all these objects, and I'll press Shift D to duplicate, and I can just drop them right here. So then I can click on this object here, and I want to click on this button right here to duplicate the material, but keep the same data. And then I can click here to rename the material, and I'm going to rename this to sand with bump. So sand with bump. So now we just need to add this color value into the normal to give it some bump. So let's take the color value and I can put that into the normal, and then you can see there's some weird shading issues. That's because we need to convert the color data into normal data. So I can press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I can search for a bump node, and we want to drop the bump node in between the color and the normal. And then the color needs to be going into the height value, and now it's converting it to normal data. So now you can see the edges look a bit bumpy. Now there is a problem with this, and that is that the edges are super sharp, and that doesn't actually work very well for a normal map. So what I want to do is make the edges a bit more smooth, and that'll actually look much better for a bump map. So what I can do is click on this F1 here on the Vorno texture, and I can change it to smooth F1 instead. Now if I just Control Shift and select the Vorno texture twice, we can see what it's doing. So F1 is going to be very sharp, but smooth F1 is the same thing, although it is very blurred. And so if we set it to smooth F1, there is also this smoothness value. So I can turn the smoothness value all the way to 0, and now it's sharp, or I can turn it up to make it more blurry. And so if we make this more blurry, the edges won't be quite as sharp, and that'll look much better for the bump map. So I'm going to Control Shift and select the principled shader, and I can now just drag around the smoothness value to change the sharpness of that. So I actually want to make the smoothness value very small, so I'm going to turn the smoothness value to a 0.03. So it is very small, but that is much better than having the smoothness value at 0. And then also right here on the bump node, this is a little bit bumpy, so I want to make it less strong. So I'm going to turn the strength value just to like a 0.3. And there we go, so now I have that cool little bump there. And also you could turn the smoothness value up a bit more if you wanted to. You could turn it up to maybe a 0.1 or a 0.2, but I'm going to leave it at a 0.03. So that is really it. So I'm now just going to quickly do the same exact thing for these materials. So I'll select the dirt material, I'll click on this button to duplicate the material, and I can rename it to dirt with bump. And then I want to click on the F1 here, and I want to change it to smooth F1, and I've found that a smoothness value of 0.03 looks pretty good. And then I want to take the color and I want to put that into the normal, but then I need to press Shift A, go to the search, and I just need to search for a bump node, and I'll drop that there. And then the color can go into the height value, and then that is a bit strong, so I'll just turn the strength to a 0.3. And I'll do the same thing for this object, so I'll select this object, I'll click on this to duplicate it so it's separate from the other material, and I can just rename this to stone with bump. And then I can click here on the F1, I'll change this to smooth F1, and the smoothness I'll turn to a 0.03, and then I can take the color and I'll put that into the normal, and then I can press Shift A, and I can search for a bump node to convert the color value into normal data, so I'll just drop that there, and then I want to put the color into the height value, and then again I will just turn the strength down to like a 0.3. And there we have it. So there are all of the pixel shaders. And as I mentioned, you can also download these materials for free on my Gumroad store and Patreon page. Links are in the description. So that's it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed this, and thank you for watching. And if you'd like to learn how to create more procedural materials, then definitely check out my Blender procedural material tutorial playlist with the link in the description. And if you'd like to purchase more of my materials, then definitely check out my Blender procedural material packs. Those are packs of 10 materials. You can also check out my ultimate material pack if you'd like to purchase all of my materials. But I hope you found this useful, and thank you for watching.